Are you filming? I'm good? Okay. So thank you everyone for joining today. Um, my name is Derran Guinan. I'm gonna a minute talk about, give you a little brief bio of myself. I'm here to talk today about the vital importance of data protection in the security, beyond prevention. We're gonna try to draw some connections there and make it more obvious for you. Just the typical disclaimer, these are my views and opinions and nobody else's. Just in case my manager gives me shit later on. He may or may not be in the room. So let's start off with when you're on a security panel and somebody catches you rolling your eyes at the question. And it's your manager who catches you rolling your eyes at the question. It's not a really good start to a security panel, but he got me with that. So 25 years in IT, 18 years focused on security. Various industry certifications. I do believe certifications are useful. I like keyword here, industry, not necessarily individual manufacturer, etc. One of the things about these certifications, they at least show employers that you can go after something and accomplish something, right? So it's a good start right there. 10 years in the manufacturer space. So I've worked at companies such as Palo Alto Networks, CrowdStrike, and now I'm in my first year at Veeam. So what I get asked, or what I really got asked at the very beginning when I first moved over to Veeam is, you're at these companies, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Networks, top security companies, why are you leaving the security industry? And the answer is I'm not. I never was, but I saw that there was another way, another solution, another option that data protection can help with security. There's another way to go here. Let me explain how I see this working. So the security industry typically focuses on prevention, and we focus on a lot of products, right? We have firewalls, we have endpoint protection, network access control. We got a whole slew of these products. But when I think back of all my time of talking about a security posture with different companies, I can only maybe think about one or two times in 10 years did anybody ever mention backups as part of that conversation. So to me, it's kind of interesting thinking back of it once I kind of made that shift. I do believe that, I want to make it clear, I do believe in security, a security prevention posture. I do believe we do need to vet these technologies, but it can't be the be-all, end-all. We have in the world nowadays, we have lots of different disasters. Look at what's happening in Canada last. Forest fires everywhere. This stuff is, flooding in Quebec. This summer, Quebec had flooding and they had forest fires. They had everything. We're seeing unprecedented times for natural disasters. Data protection can help you with this. Security can't. Security doesn't play in this field, right? Security is there to stop something. If it doesn't stop something, it gets by. The other natural, or I shouldn't say natural, the other disaster that's out there is I call it the human-made one, right? Ransomware. Seeing ransomware, I almost was going to say we should have a, BSides should have done a drinking game. Everybody says the word ransomware these 2 days, get to take a drink. It would have been quite interesting, I think. The probability of fire, flood, or natural disaster is easy to write off, right? We're used to that. When you have an insurance policy, you write that off. Ransomware is much more tangible. It's not that easy to write off, quantify, etc. So definitely more difficult. Cybersecurity is designed to stop this. This is where they come in. Let's make it a little more clear where I'm getting at. What does every breach that happens have in common? They have a firewall. They have endpoint protection. They have all these prevention technologies, right? Prevention isn't 100%. We have to go that direction. We have to use prevention, do the best we can, but I think we need to plan a little bit for what else we can do. What is the ultimate fallback? What else can we do? Now, I know somebody in the room is thinking, ultimate fallback, what we can do. Well, let's talk about cyber insurance. This is so hot right now. Everybody's talking about cyber insurance and leveraging it. And I find it really easy. It's interesting because they can cover monetary losses. They can help with your ransomware, paying the ransomware if you need to, downtime, regulatory fines. But sometimes some people would argue two ways that paying a ransom is a problem, right? One, we're contributing to, hey, you stole from me, I'm going to pay you. You're probably going to learn your lesson to keep stealing from me or causing me grief. So that's not good. And the second thing is that it's not so easy to get these insurance companies to cooperate, right, with cyber insurance. It's not that easy. If you look at, this is from the TELUS 2022 ransomware study. I thought this was a very interesting study. They talked to 463 organizations. 95% of the people they talked to were the actual decision makers. Only 5% were influencers. And I thought 40% have cyber insurance. Only 40%. And then the next one's the one really was interesting to me. 26% had insurance, but no longer have coverage. So why don't they have coverage? So if we dig a little deeper, of the 60 of this claims submitted, 66% of people actually made a claim. Only 51% paid out. So half the people who submitted a claim actually had it paid out, and 28% had it paid out. And it says but drop coverage. But if you look at the report, it means that the insurance was actually dropped after by the provider. So the insurance cover did not renew their insurance. The others, insurance did not pay out. Some of them are still having discussions, and some people don't know what's actually going on. This shouldn't be, I think, all that surprising, because have any of you tried to use insurance lately? It's gotten very difficult to use insurance. Depending on what type of insurance, man, if you ever try to do some kind of health insurance, like a disability and stuff like that, you're fighting for your life. Insurance, you got to remember, they don't want to pay out, right? So the very first thing they're going to do is deny your claim, then you're going to appeal, and guess what they're going to do again? Deny your claim, and then you're going to appeal, and then maybe, just maybe, they're going to pay out that money. How long does that actually take? If you're in the middle of a ransomware attack, and you're going through this process, like, what is that, 3 or 4 months? How many businesses can survive 3 or 4 months waiting for help? So I'm not trying to say don't buy or don't use cyber insurance. I think that's up to every organization to figure out where they see the value in that. And I do think, personally, it does provide value, but I would not look at that value as, I need help getting back up and running next week. That's not cyber insurance. So let's talk about a pretty big buzzword in the industry. Man, I've heard the word resiliency lots this last couple of days. Even our workplace mental health resiliency was brought up. I thought that was cool. Data resiliency is having your organization data always available and accessible despite unexpected business disruption such as a cyber attack. Again, data protection can help you with the cyber attack, but they can help you with all the natural disasters, right? So in the data protection field, we've been talking about data resiliency, and I shouldn't say we, I'm only 1 year in. Everybody else who's been in this for 10, 12 years have been talking about this, but they haven't been using the business word. They've been talking about the 3-2-1 rule. So if you're in data protection or new to it, this is what they call the golden rule of data protection. You want 3 copies of your data. 1 can be production, 2 could be backups. You want to have 2 of those 2 backups stored on different types of media. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, in other words. And you want 1 copy off-site, in case your site melts down. Oh, yeah. We were talking yesterday. She actually takes her data, puts it on a portable drive, and takes it off-site once in a while, and she backups to Google. Great resiliency, both off-site. So while that has been the standard, some companies, hint, 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 have also been augmenting to make this better. We still have the 3 copies of the data, 2 different media, 1 off-site, but we've also added an extra 1 there, which is that offline. Honestly, that could be tape still, right? Tape is still effective, especially depending on how often you need it, what your process is. Also, immutable storage, copying something to the cloud. We're going to talk about immutable a little bit more in a couple minutes. And then a really big important one is zero. How do we know that when we actually do a backup, that when we need that backup, it will actually work? How many times have we all heard horror stories of people that, hey, we had backups, but when we went to run them, something didn't work. I used to see that all the time on tapes when we used to have like multiple tapes and what happened if one tape had a problem. So you want to be able to check your backups, proving that they work, and you probably want to be checking your backups if they got anything malicious in them, right? Like if we are going to talk about recovery at some point, we want to make sure what we're recovering isn't bringing back the problem into the network. If there's ransomware somewhere and we clean it, we don't want to reintroduce it. So I love this as a use case. So first off, I love Indigo chapters, not trying to bash on these guys at all. I love going there, I love reading books, and I love just wandering around chapters. I find it very therapeutic. You can take your mind out of things, so I love doing that. And it's something I passed on to my kids. So I love chapters Indigo, and it was really sad seeing what happened to them earlier in the year. But if you look at this attack, and this is all public information that I've kind of pieced together, is this, the dates aren't really that shiny here or bright, but on February 8th, an actual issue was reported, and then they determined it was a cybersecurity incident. Ransomware was confirmed on the 24th. They identified, at least publicly, that it was Lockbit on March 1st. The criminals made it known that they were going to release the data onto the dark web as well. Full website backup online on March 8th. And then I updated this on June 7th that the founder and the board members actually had to resign over it. I saw this week or the past week that the founder is coming back to the company now, but big implication for this company, right? Like, they weren't able to process credit cards for I don't know how many days. You couldn't buy anything off their site. Michelle, I'll give you the slide later if you want. They couldn't buy anything off their site. Then when they had the site back up and running, they actually only had a limited amount of things that you were allowed to buy on the website. This affected things it was a pretty major thing for an online retailer that had stores as well. The interesting thing is, if you think from a forensic point of view, when this activity happened, when you bring somebody in to do forensic, it might take 5, 6, 7 days to do collection. Let's just call it collection of data, right? Not the analysis. That could take a lot longer. But 5 or 6 days to collect the data, and then guess what? We want to get back up and running. Every day we're down, costing us money. 28 days they were down. Not resilient. I have no idea what data protection platform they were working or using, but something went wrong here, right? And it comes down to that whole, we call all the time, we talk about this, is backup is easy. It's really, recovery is hard, right? And why is it hard? Well, one, we always have to make sure everything is working. We need to be testing everything, and not everybody's testing their backup. But the other side of it is ransomware being a type of disaster is unique in the fact that you actually have somebody on the other side fighting back against you. You actually have adversaries, groups of people who are saying, oh, they're in your environment. You're trying to get them out. They're able to fight back. They're trying to fight against you to keep their presence alive. So it's completely a different approach than natural disasters overall. Immutability. Man, my first month, I had a hard time saying the word. I kept bungling it all the time. It made me really nervous, to be honest with you. I love this because, and it's another buzzword, people are talking about it in the industry, but this is basically write once, read many times, right? We want to write the data somewhere, but we don't want anybody to touch it. Which is good, obviously, because if the bad guys get in, what do they want to do? They want to delete your backups. They want to encrypt your backups. They want to do something. They want to make it as hard as possible. Again, these guys are fighting against you. So with this, you set the retention. You might say, I want my immutable backups on this one target to be 20 days. Nobody can touch those backups for 20 days. You can always get back. I thought this was interesting from that TELUS report. Multiple extortion ransomware. We got a brand new buzzword in the industry. To me, I thought it was really, we're actually making a new buzzword on, to me, when people are ransomware, they're always trying to steal your data at the same time. They want to extort you, no big deal. But we should also make sure that backups are encrypted, right? Man, that seems obvious, right? You'd be surprised the amount of people I talk to don't have their backups actually encrypted. If you don't want it on the dark web, make sure it's encrypted. What about cleanup? I briefly mentioned, I shouldn't say cleanup necessarily, making sure your backups are good, making sure you're able to recover. We want to be able to test those backups on a nightly, well, it's up to you to do the frequency, determine the frequency, but you could do it as a nightly basis. Take a backup, mount it, run scripts again against it, automate everything. I talk to a lot of people nowadays, well, I test my backups. Well, what do you do? Well, once a week I come in, I do this restore. I'm like, so you're actually doing this manually, sitting there watching this happen. Yeah, hey, that's great, but I think you, in our IT space, you could probably think of something better to do at that time. And secondly, even if you can do a restore and you've proven it, you're not ensuring that the data you're restoring is clean up to the best we know up to this point. How do we know we're not reintroducing things into the environment that are bad? Data protection can also monitor your backup environment. It can monitor the metrics of everything in your backup environment being processed, CPU load, memory load, hard drives, or the hard disk, how much activity, input, output. It can monitor your repositories and tell you, hey, we see how much you're backing up, and we know that in 29 days you're going to be full. You might want to look at some of that. But let's focus more on security. We also probably want to get notified when we see that every day your backups grow by 2%, and on this one day they grew by 50% or 80%. Could be a completely legitimate reason for this, but we want to put our hand up and we want to say, you need to investigate. You need to take a look at this. This is something that you have to dig into. What about all of a sudden we see files encrypted in the backups that weren't encrypted before? Probably something good to flag on, something worth investigating. I don't know how many people are really encrypting their own file structure and then backing it up, so probably something that we want to look at. I've always really enjoyed, if you ever see my presentations before, I always love using the CAST approach talking about security, right? It's just such a easy thing to look at. Keys of the kingdom are in the middle. That's what everybody's trying to get at. You have multiple layers of protection. You have your firewalls, your IPS, endpoint protection sprinkled. Identity control is huge now, making sure that you understand who's allowed in. You're only allowing particular people to have to prove their identity to specific objects. That's where whole zero trust is starting. We want to make sure and have these multiple layers of security. One thing I didn't realize I was missing with this whole diagram, again, until I came to data protection. What about the concept in the castle of the tunnel out? Or maybe in this regard, the tunnel in. If the bad guys are getting into your environment and they're compromising and you can bring the data back an hour later, a day later, you're kind of changing the dynamic of this whole siege of your castle. You're providing another option to protect it. We can talk about data coming out because we are doing backups. I would suggest that 3-2-1 rule, data resiliency, that we're making sure data is going out, but we can bring that data back in. We can make sure we can leverage that. What does that look like in a practical term here? This is actually a Derran diagram that I threw together, so if you want to make fun of it, you're more than welcome. So if we talk about a production site, we have typically a virtual environment. We can have physical servers. We can have workstations. Data protection protects everything, right? It's not just one thing. And a lot of times people think that. They're like, oh, well, you only protect virtual or something like that. Like, even if you wanted to back up your laptop every day, we can do that. Data protection can totally handle that. I got burnt last year by LastPass before the last breach, and 6 breaches in 10 years is pretty massive. But I thought I had some identity fraud, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to change my LastPass. I don't think it's compromised, but it's a 30-character password. I'll change it anyway. The password change didn't work, so I had to call them. They made it work, and I lost 3 years of all my passwords. They're like, well, that's not possible. I'm like, okay. So here's an offline copy, because I got a laptop turned off. Want to compare? And they refunded my money, and then 3 weeks later, we found out they were in another breach. So I now use data protection to back up my new password vault every single day. I got 250 copies of my password vault. When you lose 300 passwords, you don't realize how much it affects you till months. It takes a long time. It's like the surprise, like keeps on giving every day. A new, oh, I'm trying to do this. I'm allowed to swear, right? Shit. So I'm only allowed so many, and then YouTube won't allow it to be on. So let's talk about the backups. We can do a backup and a restore from storing the backups on production, on a production data repository, some kind of storage on site. We can do a backup copy of that backup and send it to the DR site. Now we got 3 copies, right? Production, 2 backups. We can send another copy to Azure, for example. It doesn't matter, AWS, Google, it's all the same. I'm just using it as an example. We could send a copy there. And I'm seeing this a lot nowadays. It's more like the 4-3-2 or 3-1 rule. There's 4 copies anyway. Production in 1, 2, 3. So I see this a lot. This allows you to restore multiple. If a whole site goes down, you can grab stuff from the other site. You can grab stuff from your Azure blob, whatever you want. I actually drew a couple little icons here saying that, like, if you actually did recover your full environment into Azure, you can run there as well. So there is solutions for that as well. What's a recovery look like? Because that's more important, right? Not the backups, it's the recovery. A recovery looks like I've lost a whole data center, or maybe I've lost 2 data centers. Fire up a box, get a server up and running, restore the configuration of your data protection. That config file should be stored on 1, 2, 3. That we should have multiple ways to restore that configuration. So get the configuration back up and running. That's going to include where your backups are being stored, and it's going to look at those, what's available, what disk is available, and show you what backups are good that you can start your restore. That simple, like getting a box up and running. You have an image somewhere, 20 minutes, installing Veeam or any data protection. I shouldn't be focused on one. 20 minutes, load a config, 3 minutes, restore. Very quick. What about if you don't want to actually do what I just said, and which is manual, and you want to automate this? Well, we can do the automation as well. Data protection can handle that. What if you set the runbook that if, let's think hypothetical, bad guys don't attack us on Christmas Eve, right? They don't want to attack us at night. They don't want to do any of that. So it's Christmas Eve. Something happens. You set the runbook up. Somebody takes out a whole site. It's gone. Well, if you set the runbook up, the solution is actually going to move all those workloads, have all the production moved over to another site, and get it all back up and running for you. So instead of you having to come in and say, man, it's Christmas Eve, the whole network's down, I want to be at home, how am I going to restore all this? You're notified that we had a disaster, whatever caused it, doesn't have to necessarily be security-based, ransomware, could have been a natural disaster. Data center's down, but everything moved over to the other data center. We're still up and running. I got to come in and troubleshoot something without that pressure on me of an outage. You ever been in I'm sure a lot of you have been in this, you ever been in a data center after 12 hours and you're pulling your hair out trying to think what to do and try to get help? It's not a fun experience. It's one of the reasons I don't do post-sales and implementations anymore. So data protection can handle all this for you. I typically like to rant a little bit going past this is when we talk about security tools, etc. People say, well, what else should I do to make my security posture better? And I say, start using your tools fully. There's a lot of things in configurations at different products, etc. But if you actually really look at what people are, how they have it configured, they're usually only using 10, 20% of a product. Make sure you're fully using the product. Do, like, every company, like us included, we do like health checks, check things for standards. Are you using, is your backups encrypted? Are you using immutable storage? How are you doing on multiple copies in different spots? You should do this. Let's also not forget about, in this scenario here, and I did talk about orchestrating a recovery, we also want to make sure everything's tested nightly, right? So these solutions that do this orchestration can also fire up these workloads, like I mentioned earlier, and actually check them every single night. it's really nice to say to manager, and they go, when's the last time you tested your backups? Well, we test them every single night. Here's a report. We met the RPO, the RTO. We know everything's going to work. Wow, okay. Sure takes a lot of pressure off you right there and then. Clayton might recognize this is an old Palo Alto Network slide. This thing's 10 years old. So I still do believe, and I think everybody should be practicing a prevention posture, doing the best they can to prevent as many attacks, different types of attacks. So I'm definitely not saying don't invest in this technology. You do have to invest in it. But let's just not lose sight of something that's really simple that is there that will make your life a lot easier in security, and that is data protection, right? That's where data protection comes in. I like this slide. I've used it a few times too, but I really think this hits the nail on the head, is that we're all focused on prevention technologies, these big guys that's going to protect us, but a lot of time it's going to be that little guy with the obvious solution in the back that's going to solve the day and make everything work for you. That's all I have. Questions? Did it suck? Not one question. Come on. And not you, Rick. Okay, if there's no questions, we're happy. We're around. I'm around. Rick's around. Another data protection guy. We're here to chat. If you want to have any... Oh, we got a question. See, I stalled long enough to get a question. I think change management processes overall are really good. I think typically people don't find a process is not really working until it's broken. I always love on the security side when somebody says, hey, like, we sent an email to somebody and they paid a bill to the wrong company. It's a cybersecurity incident. It's not. That's a business process that broke down. There wasn't a validation. You need to check that stuff. So I think the more you document things out, anybody knows me that I like little flow charts of everything. I want to see the flow of everything and understand it, and that's how I think you build change management, is based on the flow that you understand how everything's working step by step. I will say also from a data protection perspective, we, especially at Veeam, we're trying to add things in all the time. For example, we're about to add in what we call 4 eyes, where we actually, if you're trying to delete, what's the right term, 4 eyes, what? What's the end? It's just 4 eyes. Okay, I thought I missed something. But I thought this was really good. Say, for example, you're about to delete a repository, a bunch of data. You're going to have to get somebody else to agree with you to be able to delete that data. So you should build some of this technology into the processes, into the change management. And the technology is starting to get to that point where they're adding those the ability to do some of this to help with that change management. No problem. Go ahead. Okay, yeah, great question. Just so everybody didn't hear it, organizations are used to doing things a certain way. How do you start that change within the organization? I'm not trying to, I definitely wouldn't have the crystal ball on how it's a difficult conversation. We see it all the time as, we've always done it this way. Well, just because you've always done it this way doesn't mean it's the right way right off the bat, right? So it's really hard when you're working with people who have a mindset that they don't want to even look and encourage new things in their environment. So the way I usually, let's take, this is from a pre-sales. I'm a pre-sales engineer. I help people understand solutions at the beginning. I will look at who I'm working with, clients, my own team, and I will ascertain a strategy. Maybe I see Chad here as or Tad, sorry, my roadblock. I'm going to try to figure out what makes Tad tick, how I can help him. At the same time, I'm probably going to surround Tad with some other people that I know are friendly, maybe some of my champions, that try to influence him so it's not me coming at him. Maybe it's a few people trying to, and I don't want to say coming at him, but it's more trying to educate and try to understand and get him to maybe open a little bit, be a little more open to stuff. I do find organizations that have been with one product, one solution for a long time, very resistant to change. It does happen. I know in the last 6 months here in Edmonton, we displaced a couple products for over 20 years in an environment, like 20 years in an environment. And it was those things, hey, don't touch it because it will break, but we don't touch it, we don't want to replace it because it could break. That's a hard thing to change. But so it takes time, strategy, helping work around it, really understanding how people think and maybe how you can influence it. I think was there one more here? Okay, go ahead. Sure, great question. We talked a little bit about this, but what you can do again is let's just talk testing backups, right? We don't want to assume our backups are going to work because that's what assuming is all about, right? So that's bad. We want to test those backups, and we want to make sure that we know they're going to work when we need them. But the other side of it is we do want to check them every night. So our solution does do what we call, like, you can use traditional antivirus, scan-based technology, up to the latest definition. We can check it. Pretty CPU and, really nails the CPU. It could take hours to do. So we also have the ability to do Yara hunting that's out right away here. So now we're going to be able to look, and if you understand Yara hunting, it breaks basically patterns you design down in 8 bits, and it searches through your data very efficiently, not like antivirus. So we're actually going to be able to look for indicators of attack and compromise in the backups to match. So it's not necessarily looking for there's a bad hash, but if we know, for example, and when I was testing this week, Lockbit, we saw it on Indigo, we see it across Canada a lot now. I took a Yara search made by Reverse Labs. I'm not smart enough to write all that stuff. It had like 80 or 90 different ways to identify Lockbit in an environment, and I ran that Yara search against all my backups, and it went one by one day, and if it popped, it would say it came in infected, not infected. You probably know where your latest backup is, right? And we even draw it, make it easier, and we'll actually point out now that that's your clean backup. We actually bring that together. So great question. It's top of mind. We have to make sure that not only are we testing, but we need to ensure if we're going to restore data, we know it's good. You can also stage a backup, by the way, too. You could stage it in an isolated environment and look at it, clean it. So sometimes maybe what if your restore point, you need the restore point as soon as possible, but your clean is way further down. We can do that stage restore. You can go in and clean the data, if possible. If it's encrypted, you're kind of pooched no matter what. But if it's just indicators of attack, things you don't want to rerun in your environment, you can clean it. Michelle. No. I do know of a company that does technology like that, completely different, but no, not on, I don't, the thing with that is that's a huge CPU processing. You're really processing the traffic and doing that decryption algorithm at the same time. I think you're going to need specialty boxes to do something like that. I don't think the data protection field will be really capable of doing that. It might have to evolve a lot. Our hardware will have to evolve a lot to be able to support that type of decryption on the fly.
The other question that was running through my mind is that I know that we have CMDBs, things like that, but relative to this question, you're doing data protection, but also in a ransomware attack, we may end up having problems with configuration files of firewalls, switches, routers, whatever it may be, right? So do you back up the CMDBs, or is that basically part of
of config files for switches, firewalls, whatever they are. No, I would say the best practice there is going to bring in change management, where you're having that solution do it and putting it somewhere where the backup job is getting it. It's encrypted, it's stored on immutable storage, etc. Yeah, no problem. Go ahead. No EDR, no. No, we don't do EDR. Sure. The easiest way is that when we actually do the backup, we're actually looking, and we have our own AI ML built in now, and you can actually specify external file extensions is identify the extensions, right? So we're going to have that AI to look for files that have been encrypted, but we're also going to we do have the ability to add your own extensions. You want to put in a list of 30 or 40 different extensions are typical from encryption, you can do that. I think the next evolution you're going to see is that we are not an EDR company. We are not a threat company. And to be honest, we can't be that, right? Because we don't collect any data. An EDR company collects that data. They can do threat process or threat intelligence from it. We can't do that. But we sure to heck can integrate with them, right? And start pulling some information from them. So that's where I think you're going to see data protection as more and more people understand what data protection can do and how it can. We're not a security company, but we sure can improve a security posture. We're going to be bringing more and more of those integrations in and making sure we work with different companies. Like I've thought about 20 different examples just even with EDR. Threat intelligence, pull the threat intelligence rate from Bitcoin addresses. If we identify pull the Bitcoin rate down through, check a backup, any of these Bitcoin addresses in there that we know are linked to known ransomware threat actors. So there's definitely some stuff we can do there. Michelle? Sure. I don't, at the threat detection level at a firewall, and me and you both know we've been in the firewall game a long time, we've gone through this for a long time as competitors. It's interesting. I definitely would say that we want to encourage people as much as possible to be leveraging the cloud targets to store copies, especially using immutable storage in AWS, Azure, etc. So I would say that a lot of that traffic is going to go through that firewall. Now, do I think the firewall can identify if something was malicious in the traffic going back and forth, or to at least say, because it went through, we know it's clean? I probably don't think it. Right, it's going to be encrypted. It's going to be SSL. So and then we get in discussion. Well, you're doing SSL decryption. I still don't think that's probably going to be very possible. And I don't know too many. See, that wasn't something that I generally had conversations about back in the day. I'll be honest. And I probably would say that I would tell everybody to throw everything through, but. Yeah. Convergence is happening. 100%. 100%. I think realistically, if you're into data protection, data security, and you're trying to make sure, the very first thing that comes to that you should be doing is you got to make sure your data is available, right? So Like when something bad happens, we don't want to be waiting for that insurance policy to kick in because you're going to wait forever. You want to be back up and running and as quick as possible. You want to make sure your data is available. Then the next thing is to all the questions here, we want to make sure that data we bring back is good. So check it. I think the fact that we're able to do Yara hunting now and get into that stuff, and it's actually from a selfish security learning perspective, I love that I can go on and I don't have to be a threat intelligence guy to write all these Yara, but I could sure take them and then start to see how they're used and start to play with them and adjust and make my own, which is kind of fun, right? It's a good way to start that learning process. Any other questions? Nicole hasn't given me the hook, so we're doing good. 3 minutes, she's on time. Okay, go ahead, Mark. We really don't. No.
Why is it important, right, for the security?
Well, how long it takes us to recover is kind of important. Every minute that we're down, depending on your organization, means a certain amount of money, right? So I think it's sometimes we get into this whole discussion is what should those say? What should those be? Well, that's not up to the data protection. It certainly isn't the security team. That's up to the business. Now, the question really comes down, does the business know what it really needs? And that's a difficult discussion. The business a lot of time hasn't figured that out, and then they put that pressure on security and data protection and other IT groups. And my advice is to dodge the heck out of that question. That's not your responsibility to figure that out. Don't get into that whole thing. So, I mean, when we look at, we want to make sure that we can fulfill whatever your RPO or RTO is, and that's why even we talk about the ability to automate and orchestrate recovery, which obviously increases that dramatically. And that's what we were kind of discussing a little bit yesterday. That's the next evolution, the next step up from just starting off with doing your backup and restores and having to go through a manual process. You can automate everything. Yeah. I think, I don't know, SMB is always tougher for any topic we're talking about, security, anything, right? I will say one thing that I have been pleasantly surprised on how data protection license itself. It's usually by the number of seats or nodes or workstations, and how many does typically an SMB have? Pretty low number, right? So I've been pleasantly surprised and I want to say shocked actually, that the cost for a lot of companies getting into this is not that drastic. So the other side of it too is that most of the solutions out there, data protection, Veeam included, we offer a community edition, which is free up to 10 whatever type of, yeah. So I think you set me up for that question and you were trying to. I'm not sure why, but thank you. It was good. I like the freebies and keep giving them to me all day long. Anybody else give me a freebie? Not Michelle, because hers are not freebies. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day, and we're around to talk.